Welcome to Malachi's Message Toxic Mold Sex Story Series, co-hosted by the co-founders of Malachi's Message, Emily Rochelle and Elizabeth Kirk. Here we will be interviewing and hearing from people who have been through mold. We hope that this helps others feel not alone, not crazy, and that it gives them the strength, hope, and resources that they need to continue on in their journey. I'm Elizabeth Kripe, and I get to co-host this episode of Toxic Mold Sex Stories with Emily Rochelle, who is also the co-founder and board chair of Malachi's Message. Today, we get the privilege of interviewing and hearing from Kendra and Brandon. Kendra is an advocate for improving your health by improving your indoor air quality. Almost a decade ago, Kendra discovered hidden mold and water damage in her home. She figured out that they were impacting her family's health. After years of research into mold and indoor toxins and a lot of hard lessons learned, she became dedicated to helping others by building awareness in online communities and collaborating with fellow advocates to educate the public around the importance of indoor air quality. Brandon is passionate about indoor air quality as well. He specializes in public policy and legislative reform for mold at the state level of the government. In late summer of 2019, he suffered from serious health effects from mold exposure after living in a water damage rental in Cleveland, Ohio, which he's still actively treating for today. His tireless advocacy efforts have helped in the creation of two bills in the Ohio House of Representatives, HB 251, the Ohio Indoor Safe Air Act, and both Florida House of Representatives and Florida Senate, HB 933, the Toxic Mold Protections Act, awaiting the Senate bill version number. He's currently enrolled in a master's program in the University of Florida's Environmental and Global Health Department. So they're very, very busy, very, very busy advocating, and they are just both amazing human beings. The interactions Emily and I have been able to have with them have just blown us away. We're so excited for you to hear from them today and hear what they're about and a little bit at the end of what they might be moving towards. Emily, go for it.
Kendra, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what was your life like before mold?
Sure. It was blissfully ignorant, I like to say. I was in my 20s. I was a newlywed. I was working, enjoying time with friends. I think we were just kind of living our best life before we decided to settle down and have kids. And I mean, looking back now, I know that my journey probably started sooner than my awareness started. But I was just like your average 20-something year old, and it was great until it wasn't.
Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like before mold?
Yeah. Kind of along the same track as Kendra. It was, I was 30 years old when I first started to experience symptoms. So what I thought I was in great health at the time. I traveled the world with all my friends. I had a really active personal and social life, friends and family. I was on track to living the life that I was building towards. And suddenly that all changed the first day that I started to experience symptoms. So yeah, my life was just like any other 30-year-old. Yeah, I mean, I had a career that I was working towards and everything. So yeah, everything changed. Everything changed after I was in that building. Yeah.
So Brandon, when did you first realize then that you were dealing with mold?
It wasn't until a year after symptoms onset. Every time I speak to somebody else that's been injured by mold, it's a lot of the same story, which is, most folks don't realize what it is right off the bat. So I started to experience many multi-system symptoms. Luckily, I had the Cleveland Clinic right in my backyard in Cleveland, Ohio, and I also had university hospitals. But after going to all these different specialties and misdiagnoses and lab after lab that said I was normal, even though my health was just completely degrading, I got lucky because I finally found a physician at the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center. And within 3 questions, it'd taken a year and over 10 doctors, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. And within 3 questions of meeting with the physician there, she asked me what my living arrangements were like indoors. First doctor to ask that question. And I told her the situation. She asked if there was any leaks or musty odors or any water damage that I could tell. And I said, well, yeah, down in the basement, there's water down there all the time, and which is where the HVAC units were, pulling air up into the living quarters. And I'll never forget it. When I answered her that, she was typing notes up, and she took her glasses off and she looked at me and she said, so tell me why this isn't a good story for mold. And that was the beginning of everything, leads me here today to speak with all you. So, and all the advocacy. So I got really lucky, after a year of basically being at the end of the road of options, I got really lucky.
Did you feel relief at that point to have an answer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you're in this situation, not only are you physically feeling as poorly as ever, but the emotional and psychological toll that this takes is just as much of a burden, because a lot of people don't understand because they can't see it. Like you might look normal to somebody, but you feel so sick. And after a while of not having any answers, you start to question what is actually happening. And so for somebody to finally give an answer and for us to look into it and to know what the cause was, I can't even tell you the relief that I felt, just that alone. Even though physically I felt so sick, just having an answer gave me hope that there was a path out. So, yeah.
Kendra, what was your story like, your mold story? When did you first realize you were experiencing the exposure to mold?
So I think if I had to pick like a start time, it was probably when we bought our first house in 2011. And it was a flip and it looked beautiful. And we live in Northern Virginia, and it was a big move for us. And we hired the inspector. We thought we did everything the right way. And I remember the inspector found some moisture in the basement, and the sellers agreed to fix it. And they called us over like, oh, they found some mold and water damage. They want you to come take a look. And I have this picture of the realtor and I and the inspector and their seller and realtor. And we're all in the basement with this wall torn down, looking at this mold and water damage with no containment. And I thought, well, this must be somewhat okay, or we wouldn't be standing here. They wouldn't let us stand here. And I know, I don't remember all the details, but I know the seller fixed it. We later went back and opened up that wall to make sure everything was done correctly. But it was after we moved in that we started to realize that there were just other things wrong with the house. And we hired all the right licensed and professional people to help us out. And so slowly we're just fixing things as they pop up. And it probably wasn't until about 4 years later, when my second child was born, that I noticed a really tiny water stain in the ceiling. I was in the kitchen and there was the bathroom above it. And I thought, I have a toddler, I have a baby. I want to make sure I really dot my I's and cross my T's. So I call a plumber, and the plumber office was like, yeah, don't worry, he'll just open up the wall and he'll take a look and see what's going on. And I was like, okay, but like, what if there's mold? And she was like, well, he's used to it, he'll just work around it. And something in my mom gut was just like, I don't think that sounds right. And so by luck, I happened to call a great remediation company. They're a lot harder to find. So I think my lucky stars that the people we did call ended up being very good. And this woman who answered the phone is an angel. I have talked to her since then, and I don't think she realizes the impact she had on my life, because the first thing she said to me was, I am not your first call. your first call is to someone like an IEP. And I was like, okay, well, what's an IEP? And she's like, it's an indoor environmental professional. They're independent. They're trained to seek out water intrusion and mold, and they're going to give you an independent assessment. And, I'm starting to like freak out, like, oh, this could be serious. But I'm also equally impressed that she's like, hey, no, call this other person before you call us. And she's like, even if you don't hire us, you still want to call an IEP first. And I thought, oh, okay, that's great. So I start looking and I find an IEP, and we lucked out. We had a pretty great IEP come out, and he's like, I'm going to check the whole house. I'm like, no, it's only this one little spot. He's like, we're going to check the whole house. So he checks the whole house, finds some other spots. Without getting into all the details, it was a very extensive remediation done the right way and fixing a lot of these issues that had been previously done not well. And it was stressful and expensive and exhausting. But even then, I don't think I connected the dots still that some of our health issues may have been created or exacerbated by our living environment. And I started doing just some research and realized that a lot of the things that the doctors had dismissed as normal, or, that's just kids being kids, I realized maybe spoke to something bigger. To be fair, we do have some genetic susceptibility and family history of some of these things. So again, we were explaining away certain issues because of that. I'm also a tired mom, that's why, hormones, that kind of thing. But it was then that I think, like many families, I started to realize that our pediatrician and some of those people weren't going to be the people to help us. Without getting into too many specifics about my kids' health issues for privacy reasons, I mean, we had a laundry list of symptoms from, pandas to Lyme and co-infections to EDS to mast cell to allergies to eczema to OT issues, PT issues, thyroid issues. And it took us a while, we had found the people to help us with our home, and it took us a while to find people to help us like heal our body. And we got there. It took a while. We made some mistakes. We falsely assumed that the previous people we had worked with, they were licensed, they were insured. I assumed falsely that meant that they knew what was best for us, that the inspector we hired early on, well, certainly he knows what he's doing. Certainly there's got to be laws in place to protect the consumer. I didn't know at the time that mold remediation was not a very regulated business at all. As you guys know very well, there are minimal, in some cases, no laws regulating what that looks like. So when I say there were a lot of hard lessons learned, there were a lot of financial lessons learned, emotional, physical, mental strain over the years of putting those pieces together. I think too, I still carry to this day a fair amount of guilt as a mom, that it was my job to protect them. And I've had to come to terms with that a little bit, that, you did the best you could with the information that you had and the circumstances as they were. And mind you, this is 5 and 10 years ago. So this is before great podcasts like yours, or, Mold Medic or Mold Finders. It was before even a lot of the Facebook groups. And so, I trusted the professionals that we hired. And so it was a bumpy road, to say the least. And even to this day, we are in a house and we are dealing with a small roof issue that I'm being proactive about. And I vetted all the right people. And because it was in the attic, I think the company assumed that I would never check. Well, I am not the person you mess with now. So I went back up, and what was a tiny issue, now I had water in my attic, and I was appalled. Like, I've been at this for 10 years and I vetted these people and I was thorough, so thorough. And, it's still one of those things that I stay on top of. I don't know if your mold journey is ever over, so much as you just get a little wiser and you learn to make better choices. Kind of brings me full circle to, here we are now. But yeah, it was a lot of growing pains along the way.
Kendra, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but would you mind, when we spoke previously, I was so impressed with the fact that after you started to see this happening and seeing how it impacted your family, you just became like a research guru. You probably have more knowledge on the subject than most of the people that I know or interact with. And you created an amazing Facebook group out of it. You've got just some amazing resource guides that I think if anybody is watching this, they need to go check that out, because the guides are very well laid out. They're very simple. People can read them, understand them. So would you mind just letting people know what your Facebook group name is so they can check it out if they want to?
Sure. That's kind of you to say. It's so hard because I'm just not just a mom. I'm a mom. I'm a teacher by trade, and I felt very quickly that it became my responsibility. And so I very type A. There was no stone unturned. There was no book I didn't read. There was no question I didn't ask in a Facebook group or research. And ultimately, I ended up starting. The Facebook group is Mold and Toxins: Healing Your Home and Body. And I'm very clear with people, I am not a licensed professional, but it's a place to start your research. It's where you can learn to become your own advocate. It's information that I wish that I had when we first started our journey. I've worked really hard with, the other admins to curate resources that are reliable. Because if you go to Google or even, some of those Facebook groups, some of them saved me. They were the first people to believe me or to point me in the right direction. But there can also be a lot of misinformation and a lot of fear. So we try really hard to just connect people with, you guys and your resources and good standards for remediation, what it looks like, what it doesn't, because it can be hard as a sick or overwhelmed person, trying to find the answers and take care of your family and take care of life. And so I hope it's a place that people feel like they can come and start that journey off on maybe a better foot than what we started it off on.
One thing that you mentioned, Kendra, which really resonated with me, was just the whole mom guilt thing. Mm-hmm. I think that every mother that goes through mold who has a child that gets injured suffers with that mom guilt for years until they finally realize they have to let it go because they can't change what has happened.
Yeah, right? You carry so much guilt as it is as a parent about just like every little thing, right? Are they eating the right thing? Did I deal with that little argument with their sibling the right way? But it is a hard thing. And I wish I had an easy answer for people to let go, because I still struggle with it sometimes to this day. And I guess my message to people is you got to give yourself some grace. Like, everyone is going to make mistakes on this journey. And so accept it, forgive yourself, which is so hard to do, and move on, because that fear, that panic, that guilt serve no one. I remember talking to Brandon early on when he met, and he's like, you got to let the guilt go. He's like, just, you can't accept that. You can't carry that. And, it's a hard thing. I know you guys know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do know that.
No, we've talked a lot about that and how a lot of people don't grieve. And so that guilt can stick around a lot longer if people aren't able to acknowledge it and grieve what they've lost and grieve the part that they played in that, and then be able to move on. And that's something that is probably one of my biggest passions in the whole process, is being able to grieve what actually happened and calling it by name and moving on. And I know that's something that's helped both Emily and I a lot too in the process with our mom guilt, is acknowledging it and knowing, yeah, you can't change it like you've talked about, but it takes a long time And grace is much easier to give to other people than to yourself.
And I'm sure you guys can speak to this too. Like it's not something most people understand. And so they can think you're crazy. Like people have lost relationships over this, and spouses and divorce, because mold can often be this hidden, invisible thing that when it's out of sight, out of mind, how could it possibly be impacting you? And I know most of us are all familiar with the not being believed, whether it's your doctor or a family member or a spouse. So it adds to that burden and guilt as well.
Yes. I had a mom recently mention something to me, and I never really thought about it this way. But whenever somebody is responsible for the injuries that you've suffered from, whether that's a contractor who did a poor job that caused more damage, which allowed the mold to grow, which, made you guys more exposed, or a seller not disclosing properly, or a home builder, that even at the end of the day, if they win that lawsuit, that individual never has to say they're sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Their insurance just gives them a check and they're done with it. And that's just not okay, And so that resonated with me too, because sometimes all somebody really wants is for that individual to recognize what they did and just apologize.
Right. And and the hardest part too is I like to think that a lot of people have good intentions. I don't think they set out to do things poorly. I think they're just following the CDC guidelines. You can rip this out yourself if it's under a certain square footage. You can handle it, or I'm following what my licensing says. But that speaks then to a bigger problem about the lack of regulations and appropriate standards that we have to follow, because I do think most people are doing what they think is best or right, and it's just falling short,
Yes. We're lucky to be in Texas because at least we can hold contractors accountable.
Yeah.
Where in all the other states, they don't have to carry liability insurance, where somebody can at least have some sort of recourse to go collect the damages that person caused to their home or their health. So thank you for sharing all that, Brandon and Kendra. That was impactful stories. How has mold, Kendra, I'll start with you since you just finished. How has it impacted your life afterward, like moving forward?
So I will say, I think I'm more compassionate and empathetic now. Not that I wasn't before, but I always joke, like, you can meet another moldy, as I think sometimes affectionately we call ourselves, and you don't even have to say anything. And there's like this unspoken bond. They get it, right? I also think that and this kind of speaks to who I've become the last few years. I'm a big fan of learning to become your own advocate, because no one will care about your health or your home as much as you will. And so whether it's, reading up on the treatment your doctor's suggesting or the suggestion your contractor gave you, like, you as the homeowner, as the person, have to take ownership of what people are suggesting and check it out for yourself. And I think I've learned too to trust my gut. And I know a lot of us have had that feeling. If it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't. Sometimes I think contractors or mold remediation people or your doctors tell you what they think you want to hear, not necessarily what you need to hear. Or they tell you what's like convenient and easiest for them. Oh yeah, this is no problem. I can just tear this out. Or, mold behind the wall can't hurt you. I would love to believe that. That would make my life simpler, but that's not in my gut. I know that's not right. So trust your gut. I think one of the other things that I have come to realize too is that no home is perfect. There's no perfect home or perfect test for your home. And I used to get really kind of frustrated and angry about that. And then I've kind of come to terms with the fact that maintaining my home is just as much a priority as maintaining my car or going for my yearly physical. I get my house evaluated every year, maybe a little longer, by an IEP. We've made a commitment to do that. But more importantly, I'm the one who weekly is kind of going through, I check underneath all my sinks. I've gotten really comfortable going into my attic. That used to be a space where I'm like, please don't make me go up there and look. But now I'm in my attic pretty regularly, making sure that there isn't anything going wrong. I am checking behind my fridge. I am taking my moisture meter. I learned to, bought a moisture meter. I read up on how to use it. I have a hygrometer. I measure the humidity throughout my home. And so I'm a lot more proactive. I don't know about any of you, but when I walk into a building, like my eyes look up at the ceiling. I look at the baseboards, right? I'm not caring about the pretty cosmetics, like, oh, that's great countertops. I don't care about any of that. I start looking for the structural things that might be impacting us. I think the other thing too is, I'm not going to lie, I do have a canary in my family, as I think it's Jill Carnahan says, where she's super sensitive, as am I. So we can pick up on things much easier than the average person. Like I can walk into a building and be like, I think there's mold or water damage here. And so I do think about that when we go into buildings or plan vacations, because it does factor in for us. We finally decided to try and take a trip to the beach a couple years ago. And I was really nervous that this is something my husband really wanted to do. And the whole time I'm thinking about, okay, well, hurricane damage is a potential, it's a vacation property, how is it maintained? And so all those things do factor into my thought process, but I try not to dwell on it and let it be like this negative thing. It's just something I try to live with a great deal of awareness about. And maybe the silver lining is that we do live more consciously and are more mindful of our health than maybe we otherwise would have been.
I have a canary in my family too, me and my son. Mm-hmm. I actually just had to withdraw my son from school because he just kept getting injured every time he went back to the building. So, and I'm like,
I am too.
Yeah, you're a canary too, Brandon?
Yeah, yep. Anytime I can go in and immediately, I'm like, nope, this place isn't good. And it's tough too for my, like when I was moving down here, my mom helped me out. And I mean, she got to see it firsthand, like, whereas before where we used to travel all the time, it's like I could go in and out of buildings, no problem. And then, we're trying to find a hotel to stay in, and it's like, this isn't going to work tonight. I'm sorry. And that causes a lot of stress for everybody. And then you feel bad about that because you don't want to be an inconvenience. But at the same token, as long and hard of a journey as it's been to get back to where your health is now, even though it's not 100%, you don't want to take any steps back.
Yeah.
So you almost have to, really do your due diligence for where you're going to be staying and whatnot. But the other side of that too is I think this is helpful, is to really let whoever that you're with know, hey, I'm going to be looking out for this, because and thankfully for me, my family's been and friends have been supportive and understanding. And I know that a lot of people don't have that. So it's been a little bit easier for me to navigate, but it's completely changed. Everywhere I go now, I have to take that into consideration because I'm a canary. So I can empathize with all of you a lot.
Yes. I have so many people that call me like, oh my God, like I've just changed hotels 5 times and I'm still having issues. We just have to kind of end up laughing about it because that's your reality, And speaking of, Brandon, how has mold changed your life moving forward?
Oh, it's completely changed my life. I mean, it couldn't be any different. I was, as I said, I was on one track. I was working for the FAA. Well, I'm still working for the FAA, but my personal life and the goals and dreams that I had before I got sick are now in the past. And so now I'm on a new path. I would have never dreamt that I would have been involved with getting state legislation created and proposed, helped, becoming an indoor air quality passionate advocate, meeting everyone on this call, but not only that, just the wider team, I'm going to say, of people that are trying to do right for this community, this overlooked community. So yeah, I'm much more health conscious now. My hope is that when I'm on the other side of this, not if, that, you know, I'm in the best shape that I've ever been, that I feel the best that I've ever felt. That's the aim. And the other side too is mold makes you more empathetic. You know, there's always a silver lining. And I think I could have done more of that in the old version of me, to be more understanding of everybody's situations. And now I am wholeheartedly. But I've met some of the best, you know, I've met some of the best, most courageous, passionate, helpful people along the journey, too, even though they've been given every reason to not be. And that gives me hope that, you know, if we all kind of come together on this as we're doing, to push this forward, that, you know, we're going to go far. We're going to go far. So yeah, that was a long way of saying my life is completely different. I'm in a master's program down in Florida now. I was living up in Cleveland for environmental and global health. I'm pushing for legislative and public policy reform in the indoor air quality space. And, you know, I'm in a much more fulfilling space in my life because of what happened, even though it was the most difficult chapter of my life that I'm still climbing out of. But the light's at the end of the tunnel, and it's bright. It's bright.
So I know we can't talk a lot about it, but you just talked about the whole team atmosphere, and there's an incredible, like, behind the scenes team taking on this massive thing that is mold and toxic environments, and we're all doing it in different ways. And it's such a privilege to be part of that community. Can you guys give us just a little glimpse into what might be coming in the next few months that you are both very, very involved in?
Brandon, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Yeah.
Teaser.
So we're giving a teaser. We are in work, and by we I mean Kendra and I and Michael Rubino and some other folks. We are working on setting up a nonprofit foundation, and we're going to focus on the indoor air quality space, water damage building, mold. How does our built environment affect our health and well-being? And we're going to have a lot of different pillars of that we're going to be focusing on. It's going to be very symbiotic with what you're doing at Malachi's Message, all the great work you're doing. So more to come on that, but we're hoping to get that off the ground early spring. So coming up. Kendra, anything to add?
No, just that I'm ridiculously excited, and it's a passionate group of people, and it's just very energizing, and I'm excited to be part of it. So we are excited to share it with all of you when we go live.
We are so excited too. Like, it's such an honor to meet you guys and to be able to watch all the amazing things that y'all are going to be doing and changing for everybody else. So thank you for everything that y'all are doing and will be doing.
Well, thank you.
You guys too, and your message, and I know our stories, while different, have so many similarities, and you know, some of us I think are called to put our experience into action, and that community is getting bigger and bigger. So I think some good things are on the horizon for those of us who are working in this space around mold and water damage.
Yes.
We are going to have you guys back on though, when it is live and active, so you can go into a little more detail.
For sure, we'd love that.
Absolutely, would love that. We'd be honored to come on again. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. We will give everyone more details as the organization goes live. We will put in the comments a link to the Facebook group that Kendra is a part of. And we are just incredibly humbled that you guys took time out of your busy days to come chat with Emily and I. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.